Welcome to Machine Minds, where technology and humanity meet. I'm your host, Greg Terusian, founder of Samson Rose, a recruiting and search business focused on the robotics and AI industries. The Machine Minds show is where we dive deep into the intricate world of robotics and artificial intelligence. As a staffing industry leader with a passion for the frontiers of technology, I'm pleased to be bringing you intimate conversations with the founders, investors, and trailblazers who are at the heart of the AI and robotics revolution. In each episode, we dig into their journeys, the applications of the products they're working on, and the breakthroughs that are shaping our future. Join us as we explore how these machine minds are transforming the way we live, work, and understand our world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a tech enthusiast, or just curious about this amazing field, you'll learn something new with each episode. Let's delve into the extraordinary. Let's delve into machine minds. Hello and welcome to Machine Minds. I'm your host, Greg Terusian, founder of Samson Rose, your robotics talent search partner. And in today's episode, I'm joined by James Emerick, co-founder and CEO of Cosmic Robotics. Thanks for being on the show today, James.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I know we've been trying to plan this for a while, so I'm very thankful we've got it going and, great timing. You had the TechCrunch piece come out yesterday, so all good things. Let's jump into it. Let's rewind a bit at first, really, before Cosmic Robotics. What were you up to? What were you doing? Any standout moments in your journey or things that shaped your thinking around robotics?
Yeah, totally. I think rewinding all the way back, my family's actually been building in New York since before the American Revolution.
Wow.
So going way back there. Then my grandfather was a home builder and a building inspector. So every chance I got, I was spending time on his job sites, at his home workshop, just learning the craft and really loving that. And then in around like in eighth grade science class, I learned what an engineer was. And I was like, kids are, it's like, you got to grab onto that thing that, you say you're going to do when you grow up. And so I was like, all right, an engineer, like that's what I'm going to be. That's what I'm going to do. Fast forward, I studied mechanical engineering and robotics, a bachelor and master's. And like, as I was going through that, what stood out was I really loved construction. And we have all this incredible new technology available to us outside of it, great software tools, robotics, sensors, hardware. But the tools used in construction were the same tools that my grandfather used when he started his career, 50 years prior to that.
Right.
And so I had this feeling that, we needed new tools for construction, and it wasn't like flashy new tech. Like, we need things in the hands of people kind of doing the real work there. Tools in the hands of experts on the ground. And so actually, one quick aside, on that point, I was like walking the construction site with my grandfather one day, and he like points out to someone across the way. It's an older gentleman wearing bib overalls. And he's like, whenever you see someone like that, older guy wearing bib overalls, I think he was hanging a door, which is actually a really challenging task. It's like, pay attention.
Really?
Pay attention to the guys in the bib overalls. And like my interpretation of it is that there's like a deep wisdom and skill in the craft and really spending a lifetime honing that. And so building tools for folks that do that is really important. It's in the hands of a skilled builder that a tool becomes useful. I think fast forward along the way, I was able to then eventually meld these two worlds of kind of construction and new technology tools to get in the hands of these master builders.
That's awesome. Awesome. And you've obviously worked across some unique corners of the industry, a few roles prior to founding this company. What was the moment that you knew that you wanted to start a robotics company?
Yeah, I think still since like childhood, I always knew one day I would start business and a business doing things in the real world.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think aside from spending time on my grandfather's workbench, I like would follow my dad who was in business and follow him around his work and learn that world as well. But post college, you touched on that experience. I had the opportunity to be an early employee at a company called Built Robotics, startup here in San Francisco, making autonomous bulldozers and excavators. So 30-ton machines, moving massive amounts of dirt around a project. And I mean, that's another child's dream. And so with Built, I spent a lot of time in the field, building the hardware, the software, and actually getting it into the hands of folks. And I realized that there are just a lot of opportunities and really high leverage points in construction where the industry and the technology was finally ready to actually bring new tools to the task and construction and help folks, get their jobs done much faster, more effectively, and most importantly, safer. And so I spent 4 years there deploying robots across the country and the world, in the winter tundra of the high plains in Kansas, the heat of the Californian desert and the Australian outback, and had a great time doing that. It was really incredible. And then post-built, I did spend a little bit of time at Autodesk and their Autodesk research facility here in San Francisco, and looking at adaptive robotics and manufacturing and construction applications, where that's kind of actually a key unlock in bringing more automation and new tools into construction, is that you need to be able to adapt to the environment around you, right? In a factory setting, you can have fixed automation. We have had robot arms and fixed arms and assembly lines for a long time now. And those can be pre-programmed and rigidly moved to a pre-programmed point in space that never changes. But in construction, you can't have that. The environment is dynamic. It's always changing. And therefore, you need this adaptability piece, the sensor feedback and perception to actually build, to bring this technology out into the unstructured world in construction. So I went to Autodesk Research to kind of get steeped in the latest and greatest research that was happening there, and learn what was going on. And then kind of in both of those experiences at Built and Autodesk, and kind of my personal experience in construction, I started to think of what's a rubric, or what are the criteria to actually find the high leverage points to bring these new tools out into the field. And so it was around this time that I met Lewis, my co-founder, and we kind of came up with these 3 criteria. One, it's like pretty obvious. We needed to find a problem and a solution to that problem, or find a solution to a burning problem that's happening out in the field today. That's like pretty obvious and pretty standard. We needed to find a task that kind of does look like manufacturing, in that it's highly repeatable, highly scalable, and has like standardized parts. I think just, for automation makes a lot of sense. And then the really key piece that I think folks don't realize, or maybe like miss a little bit, is that we needed to build a drop-in replacement for how things are done today. So you look on site and you see how crews are doing their work. We're not going to change that overnight. We're not going to change construction overnight, but we need to get a tool in their hands that can be a force amplifier to the existing process. And then over time, they can use that, and then that will eventually change how they work.
Nice. Very cool. So let's switch gears and talk about cosmic robotics. I'm curious how it actually came to life, and what was that light bulb moment, or was it more of like a slow burn, as you mentioned when you met your co-founder and you were like, oh, we've got to figure out this problem set that we're going to go after? What was the spark that kicked it all off?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. There's a slow burn and then there's a spark. So we had our 3 criteria, and we knew that there's something out there. And I'd spent a lot of time on solar farms in my past life, and so I had a feeling that was going to be a great entry point for us to build these tools and actually solve a huge problem that was happening in the industry today. But then what kind of really came, that spark happened when Lewis and I actually took a road trip down to Desert Center, California, which lives up to its name. It's really? Outside Joshua Tree National Park. There's nothing there. It's just desert as far as you can see. And there was a company there building one of the largest solar farms in the country, actually. And we just walked around site for the day, watching these crews in 100-degree heat in the desert, lifting these 80-pound solar panels overhead time after time. And for context, these like really large solar farms now can have anywhere from a couple 100,000 to a few million solar panels on them. So the scale is just big, massive. And you could have dozens or even a couple hundred people on site, all in parallel doing this heavy lifting. And so it was that moment, the car ride back, it was very clear that this hit all of our criteria, and it's just a massive problem. And so after that, we kind of just put our heads down and got to work.
Love that. And I think I know the answer to this, but just for the audience, why the name Cosmic? What's the ethos behind that, or is there any meaning?
Yeah, it's interesting. And yeah, I think it's a pretty common question. So a lot of folks ask us. And I think it means, it can mean different things at different times, but starting from kind of the fundamentals, our mission with Cosmic is really to accelerate the construction of critical infrastructure. And we're starting that in utility scale solar, of course. But our backgrounds are a little bit different. So I have the family construction background and a little more grounded here on Earth. Whereas Lewis's personal ambition since childhood is to build a city on Mars. And so he started doing that by going into the aerospace industry naturally, working at places like NASA JPL, SpaceX, and Relativity Space. But really quickly, he kind of realized that in order to build a city on Mars, transportation, the rockets, is not going to be the bottleneck. The bottleneck is how do we actually build and create a livable environment once we get there. So that's how that's kind of how we got introduced and his entry point into building new tools for the construction industry. And so the Cosmic name is kind of a nod to both of our different perspectives of, we need to build tools here on Earth to solve our problems. So that eventually that same technology can be used to expand civilization beyond our home planet.
That. And is there like a long-term problem that you want to be solving, or in your opinion, is there anything that's like urgent or overlooked at the moment that you guys are going to be addressing?
Yeah.
Outside of like the solar construction side?
Yeah, I think the core piece of technology that's needed to really be able to build infrastructure in that unstructured, outdoor, chaotic environment of the field is mobile manipulation. So it's actually, if self-driving cars are kind of on a structured course, they interact with the environment, driving on roads and with pedestrians and folks, but they don't actually manipulate or do anything to the environment around them. And so the manipulation piece is really important for construction, of course, where you're actually constructing and building things. So starting in solar makes a lot of sense to build this mobile manipulator platform that can do tasks really well, but then also start to expand into other different verticals or task sets and actually start to expand the aperture of what we can build and what's possible to build with these new tools. And I think just on the energy and solar side of things, there's a massive generational shift in our energy infrastructure today, right? Transitioning from renewables and actually building all this infrastructure, not to mention the last year or two, the scaling of AI data centers and the speed actually that we need to deploy new energy to the grid to feed these data centers is really massive.
It's crazy.
And there's a reason why data centers are measured in megawatts and not flops or CPU capacity. It's because it's the most energy intensive piece, or it's the most resource intensive piece, and the critical bottleneck in actually getting more compute out into the field.
I didn't realize that, but I guess it makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, when you think about it in that way. So what's the core tech that makes what you're doing possible? Like, is there something in your stack, your hardware or software side, that you think might be unique or maybe even misunderstood or underhyped in the industry right now?
Yeah. So we build the hardware and the software. I think the real magic is, of course, how it all comes together, and actually how we put that into the hands of folks. And real briefly on like the hardware side, we're pretty pragmatic. So it's proven off-the-shelf components, we use them wherever possible and assemble them into a reliable field-ready machine. And I think that is actually something that's sometimes overlooked by folks is this needs to be a piece of equipment or a tool for what we're building and actually get it into the hands of folks and in the field. So it's not about robotics or about the latest algorithms. It's making a really reliable, call it, piece of equipment. And I like to say sometimes, a robot's something that is still a prototype and maybe isn't quite fully there yet, but a tool or a piece of equipment is actually proven in the hands of someone in the field. And then one of the big challenges is, of course, in making it a reliable tool, there's a hardware piece that needs to be rock solid. And then on the software side, it's really that adaptability and that perception to be able to deal with the glare, the dust, the snow, the rain, freezing cold, 100-degree heat, and actually be able to make intelligent decisions and do things. And really tactically what that looks like for the first product is being able to get a 6 degree of freedom pose. So the position orientation of the solar panels that we're picking up. So that's actually a really challenging object for current computer vision models because they're metallic, they're glass, they're glare, they're dust. Yeah. The glare is brutal. It's funny, right? The sun is actually pretty powerful, and it moves
especially in the middle of a desert.
Yeah, and it's at different points in different times of day, and so that getting the pose of the solar panels was actually really hard, and what makes our system really reliable. And then also similarly, getting where do we place the solar panel onto its racking that's on these solar sites. On these really large solar sites, a lot of them use what's called single axis tracking. So you put some steel vertical piles into the ground, you put like a horizontal, what they call a torque tube, the tube of metal across it, and then you lay solar panel on top of that. And it actually rotates to track the sun over the day to get maximum efficiency. And so our challenge is picking up the solar panel accurately and then finding where on that horizontal torque tube the placement needs to happen. And tolerances can be high. So we do have GPS locations and the project file, so we roughly know where it's supposed to be, but we need millimeter precision. And so to do that, you need really good computer vision and to be able to actually detect where in the world related to the robot that specific bracket is, and then install it. And so, the key piece on the software side is really nailing that really challenging perception problem.
Yeah. That it sounds very, very difficult, especially in that type of environment. Not to throw shade at anyone else, but there's obviously other companies that are trying or building other things in the solar industry. Is there anything that you think others in the industry get wrong about the problem that you guys are trying to solve, or even just the way of tackling the assistance in the solar industry?
Yeah. I mean, I think we need all the help we can get to build our critical infrastructure. And so anyone tackling it from any way, we need to, throw the kitchen sink at the problem. And, some methods will, prove maybe more effective in certain scenarios than others. And we need to try it all out. It's kind of all hands on deck. I think that being said, what has made solar the cheapest and fastest new energy to the grid, and also the task in solar that actually has the lowest amount of cost overruns and time delays of any vertical in construction, is because solar construction is inherently modular. So you have these, common building blocks, right? The solar panels themselves, a couple 100,000 to a couple million on each site. You have the steel piles and the torque tube. They're all the same metal bracket, and there are only really a handful of manufacturers that make them. So they're kind of standardized parts in a way. So everyone knows how to fit these things together, and it follows a standardized process. And so if you're a crew on a site, there's actually a lot of institutional learning that can happen on a project by project basis and across projects of parallel processing this inherently large scale, really hard task. And so our core belief is that we want to build a drop-in replacement for how folks do today and kind of fit into the model of solar, which is inherently modular and parallelizable. And so, going back to the solar construction does look a bit like manufacturing when you squint at it. These standardized parts, really high volume, highly repeatable process. That's true, and that's what makes it great. But I think some folks, if you squint, you could say, hey, what if we stuck an assembly line in the desert and then started cranking out sub-assemblies more factory style, and then moving them across the site. And I think it just kind of breaks the model for what's made solar great and makes it actually a more challenging integration problem. And so for us, we think really strongly that we shouldn't be building factories out in the field, and we should be building a tool that gets put in the hands of these master craftsmen to actually do their same work just faster and more effectively, and really safer is a big one too.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Who's your ideal customer today? and how are they using your platform or your products?
Yeah. So our ideal customers are the folks boots on the ground that are doing the work. So the general contractors, the EPCs, so engineering, procurement, construction firms, the folks that are actually putting steel in the ground and lifting solar panel glass overhead and placing it onto the bracket. They're managing massive projects. They have tons of projects going on at any time across the country. And a lot of them actually tell us that they would 2 or 3x the amount of work that they could get done if labor wasn't the issue. They just can't find enough people to get the work done. And since the demand for electricity is exploding and solar is the kind of rational choice for new energy to the grid, they just cannot get work done fast enough.
Yeah, can't wait
Crazy.
for your product. What's your opinion on that? I'm curious. Is it because obviously there's a lot of industries that have been impacted with labor shortage, especially since the pandemic. A lot of people didn't go back to certain industries or back to work in general, from what I'm still hearing. And we have this topic come up time and time again on the show about, robots, quote unquote, replacing people. But in industries like this, it's just a shortage. You can't get the people to do it. Why is that for this industry specifically? Are there just not enough skilled people? Are people not returning? Are the projects too big and coming on too quick? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think it's a whole host of things, of course. There is certainly a skilled labor shortage and a labor gap that exists today. And some folks in construction refer to it as the gray tsunami. So we have the older generation, reaching retirement age, and the younger generation just isn't coming in to fill that gap. And I personally know a bunch of folks that have been looking to retire for years now, but just feel a duty to keep getting the work done out in the field. And so they can't retire because their kids are, off doing something else and aren't kind of falling in and taking their place. So there's certainly a labor gap and a skilled labor gap there. And then also the work that happens, especially in solar, is usually in remote places. It's out in the desert, you do it in the cold year round in the mountains. And so it's really hard to fly and expensive to fly folks in and house them, even if you can find them to get that work done.
That's a good point. Yeah, these remote places where you're not going to get like local skilled workforce. Yeah, I didn't even think about that part of it. That's very true. Well, talking about hiring, or moving on to talk about hiring, obviously building a robotics company, it's not just a solo thing. It's not a solo sport. Right now, what does your team look like? You've talked about your co-founder, but I'm curious about the rest of the people that you've got on board right now.
Yeah. So today we're a team of 6 strong, mostly engineers.
Nice.
Yeah, and really folks with a hardcore robotics experience, whether it's in computer vision and perception, self-driving, mobile manipulation. What's really important is having that experience and time in the field with customers and having that customer empathy and end users in mind to actually be building something for them and not just building robots to build robots. But then another piece of our team, I think, I like to say robotics is the ultimate team sport. You have all these different pieces, different specialties, not just on the robotics side, but on the go-to-market and business side of things. And also for us, that's the folks that we surround ourselves with as a company, which are the investors on board, our advisors, and friends of Cosmic. We're really deliberate to build that right community and team around us to make sure that we can actually build the tools and get them into the hands of folks in the field as quickly as possible.
Yeah. I think that's a part that a lot of people either don't think about intentionally or just let go by the wayside. And it's that wider network, not employees, but being intentional about the investors that you have on board and their specialties industry-wise or network-wise, and then also the advisors and friends in the industry that can make referrals for you, whether it's talent, customers, investors, new markets to look at, whatever that may be. Yeah, so true.
Absolutely. It takes a village.
Yeah, it does. What when you're hiring, are there any other qualities? I know you mentioned like that focus on the product and the customer side of things, but are there any qualities that you really look for that go beyond someone's resume or experience?
Yeah, actually, the core thing that we look for, and it's like what we talk about within the first 5 minutes of meeting any candidate, um, is we really are looking for folks that want to do something and not be someone. And so I think it comes across like really clearly when we chat with folks, just asking about what they've done in the past or where they want to go, and if for example, I want to get robots in the hands of construction crews to accelerate the build out of solar or whatever your personal mission is. I think that's really important. And the flip side, it's relatively clear pretty quickly if you talk to someone and they jump right to a title or some other credential. That's a little bit of a flag for us that maybe we're not quite the right fit. So I think it's that like ownership and humility and willingness to roll up your sleeves and really do something that we look for.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a very good point. And I think being aware of that when you're interviewing people is crucial. I've had it go too far the other way with a client actually recently who was just dismissing profiles because of the companies they've been at, which were awesome companies, just FYI, but they were like to the point of trying to be someone instead of trying to do something. They're like, I need people that have actually done something notable or put things out into the world instead of what they called it was like chasing the VC hype cycle. So it was like, this is another, not to name certain VCs I was about to, but we're going to go after to that one, or this one's getting all the press, or this one, the next hype cycle, which you can see on some people's profiles, especially if they're quick stints. But yeah. I think that shouldn't be like a filter to stop you talking to people because you never know what they've actually done at these companies. Just my own 2 cents on
totally.
that topic.
Yeah, I think the other piece on that is like, I think what's wrapped into, doing something or chasing titles or kind of, following the status quo is actually having conviction about something. Like, deeply thinking about something and wanting to pursue it, and having like the strength of character and will. Just maybe it sometimes goes against the grain. Hopefully, you're riding the wave of the current trend, so to speak, and that's great. But it's kind of thinking for yourself and then deciding what you want to do. And I think sometimes if you want to, in our words, like be someone, it's like you're letting someone else do the thinking for you. If it's, you want them to see you in a certain way or something like that.
Interesting. Yeah. It's a good point. You see it with people when they've gone to, or I obviously look at resumes every single day, but you see it when people are like, oh, I was in robotics or AI previously and then jumped to Web3 and crypto and blockchain when that was the hype. And then like want to try and come back now. And then it's like, oh, I just want to do humanoids and things like that. It's like, okay, where do you actually want to be? And to your point, do you have conviction about any area that you're focused on? Because that is how you're going to stand the true test of time, especially in the startup world. It's not plain sailing. It's not easy. You're going to pivot. Things are going to be up and down. You're going to be working crazy. Like, are you just going to jump for the next thing that seems like it ticks some imaginary box that you have? Yeah.
Totally. You need that like foundation or that rock you can kind of come back to, especially when things get hard.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. How are you guys evaluating talent for such a complex field or complex problem outside of like I always call it like their core profile, which is like their personal attributes and things like that you mentioned. Is there something else that you go through to assess people?
Yeah, I think you can actually get a relatively quick read on kind of the humility and wanting to do something relatively quickly. And then I think the other piece that's really important is every day we're solving real, hard, challenging problems in the field with customers that are kind of high stakes. And so during the process, we try to simulate that a little bit and get that thought process and see how folks work through those challenges.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned before the problems your customers had with like staffing. They've just got a labor shortage, so there's obviously a demand there. Have you seen, since you guys have started working in this field, like the demand evolve at all, or any new or surprising markets or applications pop up that you maybe weren't targeting initially?
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things there is when we talk with customers, we obviously have a pretty ambitious and audacious product roadmap. But where we're starting is building this like kernel of a very useful tool that's a drop-in replacement for how things are done today. And when we talk with customers and folks, we just call it, a slightly smarter piece of equipment.
Yeah.
And we try to not oversell its capabilities early on. And I think that's really important. I think you can go the other way, of course, so we can pitch the 10-year vision to folks. And I think that, doesn't actually build for the realities of the site today. But one of the interesting things that we've heard a lot from folks from customers actually driving for us that has been on our roadmap, and it's kind of an open secret in a way, is just building digital twins for the construction site. So we have this tool that's on site that's doing the heavy lifting work and actually providing a lot of real value. But it does have GPS, cameras, other sensing modalities on there where you can start to digitize the site and create this digital twin that actually can drive insights and adapt to the realities of the field. If there are delays in one area, if there's a mud puddle somewhere, we can reroute traffic and we can start to really drive like the digitization of the site. And so we thought that's a few years away still, but it's something that was pretty surprising getting this piece of equipment into the field that customers are immediately asking us for already.
So you guys are already able to provide that? Or that's like a different product area that you're going to start adding to your current offering?
Yeah, we have a pretty basic version of it now in terms of generating as-built and reporting. We can do other various interesting things for folks there. And then over time, I think that digital twin layer is going to become more and more important as we actually deploy more pieces of equipment in the field where you need to have intelligent routing between different, we call our first product Cosmic 1A, these robots, different Cosmic 1As or different other equipment on the site that like almost app layer is going to be more and more important as we keep going.
Yeah, definitely. Would that be like a real-time thing that the client could actually use? Say, for example, they're like, oh, wait, if we think about adding several more Cosmic 1As, or if we need to shut down this part of the site for whatever reason, deliveries or whatever it may be, how can we reroute or how can we replan our day? Is that something they would be able to do?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Love that.
And so there's like kind of the two end users of it. There's the folks that are actually the crews, boots on the ground, working with side by side with their Cosmic 1A to amplify their work and get their jobs done more effectively. And then a layer up from that would be the project managers or site engineers that can actually route different pieces of equipment around the site depending on what's in the job scope for that day or that week on the project.
Awesome. I know it's still early days for you guys, but what's been the hardest part of building or getting Cosmic to its current stage? Whether it's the tech side, talent, capital, traction with clients. I'm not sure. Is there anything that stands out?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the obvious one, which is just building for the harsh realities of the field. I think we've been pretty lucky in that. I think having a really ambitious mission and a worthy mission at that, which is starting by accelerating solar construction and then eventually, enabling multiplanetary civilization, gets a lot of people really excited. And actually, it was a big draw for talent. And it allowed us to recruit a really great team that we're really fortunate to work with every day. And I think on the investment side of things, robotics is obviously having a bit of a moment right now, for better or for worse. I think for better mostly. And so we haven't really had any issues there. It's just, someone has to go build it and get these things in the field. And so just getting systems out there and doing the hard work is the hard part.
Yeah, true. Robotics, like I said, it is having its moment and very glad for that. But it's also infamous for long development cycles and things like that when you're going through hardware production. How do you guys try and stay agile and attract investors and customers, but also stay true to your mission?
Yeah. Well, I think the one thing is we are lucky to be riding on the developments of the hardware and the software that we can kind of take these modular components and assemble them. And so, even 5 years ago, we might have needed to develop our own camera housing or do a lot more custom software work than we are doing, which is still very extensive and a lot of work. But really, we just really prioritize reliability over features and actually looking at what folks in the field need to do their job, what truly is that minimum kernel of a useful tool for them, and then just prioritizing ruthlessly. So, anything that doesn't get us into the field faster or provide value immediately for our customers, we just right now cut and make sure that we're focused. And then over time, we can expand the feature set. But if we can't do the minimum set with ultra reliability, then nothing else matters.
Yeah. It's a tough one to balance that future state and innovation with customer needs, because the best way of doing it is like no nonsense, no BS, forget all the bells and whistles. What do people really need? What are they going to pay us for? What's going to be reliable? And especially in those environments that you guys are operating in, instead of like the nice to haves. And sometimes people lose sight of that. It's easy to want to have the shiniest, most appealing thing in concept or in theory, instead of, what's really going to be, how are we going to get like hundreds of these out into the field that are going to work consistently and reliably, and that we can troubleshoot effectively. So
yeah, and you need both. You need the long-term vision and the mission and the roadmap and know where you're going. You can't just be staring down at the next step in front of you the whole time, because you won't have the map, right? You won't know where you don't know where you end up. But at the same time, if you're I guess to overextend my analogy here, if you're staring at the map the whole time and looking at the big vision over time, you're going to trip and fall, and that's it. Your journey's cut short. And so there is a really hard balance there of having the long-term roadmap, but then also just ruthlessly focusing day by day, hour by hour on what is the highest leverage activity that we could do to actually get these tools in the field, and really not missing that fact, which is at the end of the day, we need to get reliable pieces of equipment in our customers' hands as soon as possible and make sure that they're reliable when they get there. And if we can't do that, then the 10-year vision really doesn't matter that much.
True. If you could wave a magic wand, is there one friction point from running a robotics company that you'd like remove easily?
Yeah. Well, aside from having a bigger yard in San Francisco to do some early testing, we are lucky to have a good yard here in the middle of the city, so we can get a lot of good testing. Then we have a lot of great customers and customer test sites and customer projects where we test in the real world, because that's most important. I'd say if we had a magic wand, it would be on the robotics side of things, having better simulation.
Interesting.
We need to get these things out in the real environment, and that's really all that matters, is where all the edge cases are, where our customers are. But the little friction point of, if we could test just a little bit more in sim before getting out there, would be nice.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's the limitations there?
Yeah, I think honestly, like physics simulators still aren't that great.
Yeah.
Just all the capturing all those edge cases, and then all the tiny little bits of the real world is still a challenge to incorporate into sim.
I bet, especially for what you guys are doing. Everything that you mentioned, those complexities, is probably so unique. Let's get a take on your industry perspectives and maybe touch on a couple of controversial things.
Let's do it.
Well, yeah. What's your view, or what view do you hold about the industry, the robotics industry, that most people might disagree with?
I mean, I think at this point, I'm not sure if it's really that disagreeable, but I think humanoids are cool. I think they will be useful, but immediately they're not useful in the way that people think they are. I think they're a real like talent and capital magnet, and have kind of captured the zeitgeist a little bit. And so I think like kind of like self-driving cars a decade ago. There'll be a ton of talent flowing in, a lot of really great technology development. I think from a public perception side of things, we're all going to get used to it. There's going to be a lot of capital, and we'll see what happens there. I think for us, that means there is going to be a lot more really highly well-trained talent that I think in the next few years maybe gets a little bit disenfranchised by the lack of progress there. And that's actually something that we can capitalize on, since we're, I think, building tools that are going to get into the hands of folks much faster. And I think that's kind of the piece of things, right? Like, even if we have amazing humanoids, we still need other equipment. And the human form factor is wonderful, but not the only way. And so even if we had amazing humanoids today, I think we'd still be building a piece of equipment like we are for construction, just like an excavator or a bulldozer. We don't have people in ditches anymore for a reason. We're not going to stick humanoids in a pit. So yeah, I think we'll see what happens there. I like to follow from the sidelines.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, it's there's probably more people with that perspective than not, and for that reason of actual functionality, actual use cases where the technology is right now. But to your point, it's a great place for all of this innovation to happen, especially if the money and talent are flowing there. You got to utilize it, but we'll see who's still around in 10 years, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if we get one Wayno out of it, I think that's worth it.
Yeah, 100%. I have my own opinions there on who it's going to be, but do you think that we're moving too fast with automation or not fast enough?
Yeah, I think it depends on the industry and the vertical and the task, of course. I don't think we're moving fast enough. There's a lot of work we need to do out in the world, whether it's in the manufacturing side, whether it's actually building large solar plants to provide more electricity to the grid and increase our quality of life. This is work that there aren't enough people to do, and we just can't get it done fast enough. And the only way is to add more automation and better tools there to get it done.
Yeah, true. Are there any emerging technologies or movements that you're excited about for the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. I think kind of on where we've been seeing folks excited by on not just the hardware equipment in the field, but that software side of things. And that's a bit of another buzzword, but I think physical AI is actually going to have a bit of its moment where we actually can have a lot of this real world, high fidelity data from the field and start to actually do useful things with them. I think a lot of folks for a lot of years, there's been IoT, all these different movements to figure out like, how do we start to digitize and run insights on different pieces of infrastructure or sensors out in the field. But I think we're getting close now where the value is there and we can start to actually do useful things with it.
Awesome. Let's do a quick, just little rapid fire section before I get some closing advice, because I'm conscious of the time. But hardware or software for you?
Yeah, have to be both. They go hand in hand.
Yes. Okay. Night owl or early riser?
Early riser.
What's your favorite sci-fi tech that might actually become reality?
I think I have to say fully autonomous construction.
Yeah. And then is there anyone in the robotics space that you admire or look up to?
Yeah. We've been lucky to come across so many amazing individuals in the field. But I think just anyone that's out there building real hardware and software in the dirt, in the mud, in the field, not just in the lab, I have a lot of respect for.
Love that. For someone listening who's dreaming of launching their own robotics startup, because we have a lot of aspiring or first-time founders listening, what's something that you wish you knew at the beginning of this journey?
Yeah, I think just get started. It's always going to be harder than you think. There's never going to be a perfect time. And the only way to really learn, no one really knows what they're doing either. And the way to really learn that is just to get out there and get started.
I was having that conversation with someone the other day. Like, it may look like so many people have it together myself included or guests or whatever. But when you actually speak to people, it's like most of the stuff hasn't been done before. So you're learning as you go and figuring it out as you go. So don't be too bogged down with being like, I have to know X, Y, Z before I get going.
Yeah, there's no roadmap, no playbook.
Yeah.
And if there was, it might not be the highest leverage thing you could be doing.
Exactly. Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. How do you personally stay grounded and motivated when you're building something so complex?
Yeah, I think it really is just taking it that like one day at a time, one step at a time. It's really easy, like we were saying before, to kind of get lost in the 10-year vision or be overwhelmed by all the things that need to happen. And I think just staying really focused and surrounding yourself with folks that feel the same way is critical.
Awesome. Well, look, thank you so much for being on the show. Before we go, I'd love to hear what's next for Cosmic Robotics and anything that the listeners should keep an eye out for. Obviously, you guys just had your TechCrunch article come out, so we'll link that in the show notes. But anything else we should be aware of?
Yeah, I think the big one is we're kicking off pilot deployments, getting these robots on sites across the country. So if, look out on your local solar farm for Cosmic 1A near you.
Love that. And if you're in was it California desert region? What was the one you called?
Desert Center.
Desert Center, that's the one.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll be out there. Awesome. Where can people find you and the company and keep an eye out on your updates?
Yeah, we're not a huge social media shop yet. So I think that the best thing is just find us, Cosmic Robotics, on LinkedIn or our website, cosmicrobotics.com.
Awesome. Well, we'll link all of that in the show notes. And thank you again for being on the show, James. I'm glad we finally got this on. And I'm looking forward to seeing everything you guys do in the coming months and years.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. It's been a long time coming, so I'm glad we were able to do it.
Glad as well. Thank you again. Speak soon.
That's good.